Okay, seems that we are live. So welcome everybody to our live webinar. We are super excited about this event, and we had some technical issues, the classic, but we hope that everybody's going to have a nice time and enjoy the conversation. We are expecting to spend around 1 hour in our conversation, and then we will also bounce some questions from the chat. So if you have some questions you want to pose to the panel, please do so by writing on our chat. Before I introduce the speakers, I would just like to mention that Ricardo and I, we established NORDFY with this idea of creating this pioneering community of designers that are exploring new ways to rethink the design process, and that want to use disruptive technology to achieve so. We see this new age of AI as a renaissance, and we also see that we are democratizing design and creativity, and this for us is a massive change on society. So we have embarked on this mission to foster education and spread design equality worldwide, and we hope to help individuals and companies in achieving more creative, more innovative, and hopefully also more sustainable designs by leveraging the technology. This is our first webinar. Our next webinar will be in late September. We don't have a date yet, but you should account for a Thursday instead of a Friday, since we had so many people making fun of us for booking this on a Friday afternoon here in Scandinavia. So enough about us. Let's start by introducing the speakers. We were so lucky to have this fantastic group of amazing professionals, and they have a deep knowledge in project delivery, in operations, in innovation, and on design process. And today we have here with us Eliana Negro. She is the head of computational design at Kobe. We also have Enlai Hoi. He's the head of innovation at SHL. We have Jake Sprout. He's the chief operating officer at Effect. We have David Fink. He's a digital manager at Henning Larsen. And we have Jens Kosholm from BIG. He's the director of design technology. Last but not least, special appreciation for the participation of Professor Neil Leach. We were very honored to have you with us today. Neil is an architect and the founder of Digital Futures, but he's also an avid thinker and a prolific writer. I think you have authored around 30 books on the confluence of architecture and artificial intelligence. So we'll start with you. But before we do that, I would just like to make sure that everybody follow these people on their social media platforms and get insights in firsthand. So Neil, perhaps you can set up the scene for us and get some thoughts going. I know you have some slides to present with us, and then we'll move into the questions afterwards.
Okay. Yeah, so this is a very short presentation where I wanted to kind of outline some of both sides in sense of AI, both its very positive, amazing potential, but also I think it's slightly scary potential. And I'm building upon something I was presenting at the AIA last week for the large firms, which included BIG. But let me start simply by saying, I guess we're all familiar with the kind of stuff that is coming out right now, the books that have come out. These are two of the books that I produced last year, and the development of diffusion platforms that have kind of spread like wildfire all over the architectural culture. Anyone can kind of do this kind of thing these days, and there's a whole new platform in terms of Instagram where people are promoting and showing the work that they're doing. It's been a real radical transformation at one particular level. And it's also producing, I would say, a new kind of a genre of young professionals who are churning out designs literally, I would say, every day in an astonishing era of productivity. It's amazing what you can do, the resolution that you can achieve. and especially if you know how to use these tools properly, how to use prompt engineering. This is the work of Carlos Bagnon, who's particularly good at ControlNet and using that in conjunction with Midjourney. And of course, most importantly, we've seen these tools enter into mainstream offices, especially the Office ZHA, who were one of the pioneers in using DALI when they collaborated with Refik Anadol. And there's some new work coming out that we saw a couple of weeks ago, where they're actually using these tools in the office to ideate, to brainstorm before they do a competition. And it's astonishing how much they're doing and how central now that's become to the office. Not the only way in which they use AI, but it is an important way. Alongside that, there are further other developments which actually are not using diffusion platforms or diffusion models, but actually taking GANs, but not GANs in terms of images, GANs in terms of parameters. And the work of Cor Pilblau under Daniel Bolojan, I think, is probably really beginning to operate in a much more three-dimensional way. It's getting beyond that realm of the image. But what I want to argue today is that I think a lot of people are being catapulted into this world of AI without understanding what AI is, and seem to think that it's somehow this world of the image is all it's all about. I want to try and look into the future and to speculate about how these tools are what impact they're going to have on the architectural office. And let me start by saying that I am both amazed but also terrified by this technology. I think that I first found out in 2018, I think it was, when I was boarding a plane for Shanghai, and I put my boarding car. I had my boarding pass, and the flight attendant said, "I don't need that. I just look at the screen," and it recognized me from everyone else on the planet. And as a result of that, when I was in Shanghai for that summer, the final day, I decided I was writing a book about AI, and I felt compromised. I was both saying what an amazing tool this was, but how terrifying it was. So I persuaded my publishers, Bloomsbury, produced two books, one about the white one, the good one, about how amazing it was, and one, the black one, the devil, the dark side of AI. And I published the first one, and I'm beginning to think about the second one. And I have to say that as a result of what's happening right now, I think that the dark side is getting slightly closer. But let me just kind of give some background thoughts on AI, and then open up some of these ideas. I've got 10 particular points I want to make, and I'll keep it to that. But let me start with the term itself. It was coined in '56 by John McCarthy. He wasn't very happy with the term. I had to call it something, and so I called it artificial intelligence. And I would say it's not a very good term. It's nothing artificial about it. It's I would say synthetic. And in terms of intelligence, it's difficult to call it intelligence if we follow the thinking of someone like Jeff Hawkins, and the neuroscientist. Rather, maybe we should think about it in terms of information processing. So it's synthetic information processing. At least that's the way I would see it. But it's important to also recognize that when they used AI in those years, it was very, very different to what we use now. It's like comparing the first car to the Tesla self-driving car of today. And I'd say it's only in the last 6-7 years that really AI's taken off because of deep learning, because of neural networks, which I won't go into now. But things are radically different, and now AI is really changing the world. If you ask most people what they think AI is, they immediately think of some sort of humanoid robot like Sophia. But actually, that's a myth. AI is simply software. It's very sophisticated software, but it is software nonetheless. And as such, you don't actually see it. So don't think humanoid robot, think code. The comment I made in my book, it is as though the Earth has been invaded by an invisible, super intelligent alien species. In other words, in the office of the future, we are going to be surrounded by AI, but we're not going to be surrounded by humanoid robots. In fact, we already are surrounded by AI, even though many of us don't realize it. AI is what filters out our spam. It's what recognizes our friends on Facebook. It's what finishes our sentences on Gmail. It's what translates on WeChat, and so on and so on and so on. It's everywhere around us, even though we're not aware of it. Throughout history, there have been a series of moments, shall we say, when we've recognized the astonishing potential of AI. Back in 1997, Garry Kasparov was beaten by Deep Blue at chess. Kasparov, one of the greatest chess players of all time. Nobody expected him to lose. But he makes this comment, which I think is very true. We just have to understand that everything that we know how to do, machines will eventually do better than us. I think the key term there is eventually, because things are speeding up, and the moment in which this happens is unclear, but we're certainly in a point of exponential increase, speed of increase. The The important thing, though, I think to me is in terms of machines, is that what most of us thought in the past was that it was robots that was going to be have the most impact on human employment. And we've all seen these kind of Tesla car factories where there are no humans at all. But in fact, robotics is actually being quite slow in really developing. It's still struggling to be able to lift up a brick, for example, and so on. And really what's happened is it's been AI that's been racing ahead. So instead of the blue collar workers, instead of the people working on the factory floor, it's actually white collar workers, it's architects and even computer scientists, because AI now is writing code very well, that are at risk. And this is a huge challenge. Another key moment was a match between AlphaGo and Lisa Dahl, the greatest ever Go player in 2016, where they had to use deep learning because of the complexity of Go. There are more moves in Go than there are atoms in the universe. And this was really an astonishing match, not because Lisa Dahl lost, and again, nobody thought that he would lose, but the way in which he lost. And there were certain moves that AlphaGo was playing that nobody understood. They were beyond human comprehension. This comment he makes, AlphaGo showed us that moves humans may have thought are creative were actually conventional, is one point. But the other point is that actually the creativity, if we can call it that AlphaGo showed, we simply couldn't understand. It's almost like it was off the charts. And if you think about it in terms of kind of like the way that a dog has a greater sense of smell or hearing than human beings, it's very clear that AI can operate at a different range of information processing, shall we say, than human beings. Now, this is reflected in some of the results that are coming out from using AI in design. This comment by Howard Hochland, the space maker, pointed out that sometimes AI would come up in a very similar way with counterintuitive suggestions that no architect would have thought about, but nonetheless, which were very strategically brilliant solutions. So basically, we are being, AI is exceeding our abilities. The comment that they also came out, which has become widespread these days, those who use AI will replace those who don't use AI. I'm not quite sure if that's the case. Certainly, we will all be forced to use AI one way or another. But what's interesting is that firms like Xcool, I'll mention more about them later, are producing this kind of software where they're basically integrating excuse me, everything in their into a program that eventually will be fully automated. So you will be able to design something where everything is conforming to planning regulations, to other codes, performance regulations, structural regulations, and so on. It will all be in one package, and it will all be on a single platform going from data to fabrication. So instead of the present situation where we have kind of, we have Maya, let's say in the Zaha's office, Maya, Rhino, BIM, and so on, it'll all be on one singular platform, and it'll all be integrated into that. That itself is kind of interesting in some sort of way, but once you begin to realize that it's going to be able to operate in a fundamentally different sort of way, we're talking about a new form of operation where this prosthesis to the human imagination is effectively going to be something that is going to have a huge impact on things. The mistake that people make when they contrast how humans with AI is to assume it's a straightforward sort of comparison, humans versus AI, which is most effective. But actually, the comparisons that should be made is between somebody using AI like this and someone not using AI. And according to some statistics, somebody using AI, one of these kind of super users, can achieve as much as 5 people not using AI. That seems to suggest there will be some redundancy in the architectural office. If it were that kind of figure, we'd be talking about 80%. I'm not sure that's the case, and I'm not even sure when that would happen, if it were to happen. But the point is, we cannot assume that things will go on as they are at the moment. Another comment that comes from Howard Hochland, the developers really want architects to use SpaceMaker. That technology is something they want. It is a requirement. I can't quite read what I said here. It's a requirement from the clients. So basically, this is why do they ask for this? Well, there are 2 reasons possibly. One is they can possibly maximize their return on investment. They can ensure that. And secondly, they can ensure there are no mistakes. Humans make mistakes, and you can see AI a bit like spell check, making sure there are no mistakes being made. But it also kind of opens up the question in some senses that does a developer need an architect eventually when you've got a system that will generate this? And frankly, I think the answer is possibly no. So the strategy that I would suggest for architects is to become a developer. In many ways, a bit like John Portman, I think one of the things about AI is it allows it to break down barriers between these silos that we have, that architects can become fashion designers and so on. I would suggest that the possibilities of becoming a developer are opened up because of the safeguards that are there, the way in which AI can take you through this potentially and make anybody effectively a developer. Another kind of comment that comes from Wanyu Her of XCool. Wanyu used to work for OMA, hence XCoolhouse, and she's possibly the leading developer of AI in the world. She's one of my doctoral candidates. And an interesting comment she made it was that we have been asked to use AI to judge competitions. Now that's incredibly interesting because it means basically if you can use AI to judge competitions, you can use AI to enter competitions. This is one such competition where they won against international competition. A number of international teams. They beat NVRDV, for example, just by using AI and so on. And that becomes hugely significant because it means basically that AI was going to give you a huge advantage. But not only that, you start to sort of ask some questions about this. I should just say this is a topological optimization study where they're looking at wind comfort and they're using AI to break down what start off as rectilinear forms and what begins to emerge a more kind of Gehry-like form, shall we say. But what that begins to suggest in some sense is that we're in a new domain whereby maybe when we're kind of putting in a planning permission, that itself is going to be judged by AI. If it's going to be judged by AI, then that kind of challenges the notion of the architect, the name of the architect, the professional architect coming forward and saying, I'm a qualified architect, here's my proposal. Maybe we just judge it in terms of its by AI, in terms of the planning permission proposal itself. But that also suggests that maybe in some senses, we don't need to have any form of licensing or registration. If it's all based on that, and we don't need to actually have the name architect. What's more, it also begins to suggest if the software is able to do all these things, then in some sense it doesn't need to be checked in the first place. If it's conforming to all the constraints, then there's no need to put in the planning permission. So I predict there are going to be some radical changes happening in that area. I couldn't not include a comment on ChatGPT about this, warning architects about the dangers of not engaging with AI. And I won't read this out in full, but I'll simply go and read the final bit. Architects who choose to ignore AI will be left behind and ultimately forgotten as the industry evolves and advances. Therefore, it is an imperative that architects pay attention to AI and its potential to revolutionize architecture, or they risk sleepwalking into oblivion. And I wrote an article. I was commissioned by Design to write an article. They initially published one where I think the author was a bit soft and saying we've got nothing to worry about. And I wrote them and said, what do you mean you've got nothing to worry about? And so they commissioned me, and I produced this article that was warning about this. And I had, interestingly, two responses. One from those who used AI, and they said, oh, of course, this is what we expected. And one from those who didn't use AI, who were very indignant and would kind of make some comments, ridiculous comments like, there's not a single AI in the market that would possibly match my ingenuity and creativity, and so on and so on. Interestingly, when I presented this to the AIA, to the large firms roundtable, including Big last week, everybody bought into the dangers of AI. And I got 10 points. My second last point, we won't be allowed to drive cars anymore, and we will not notice or care. This is a prediction by Toby Walsh. The way it goes is this. We will start using self-driving cars. Maybe we're going for a drink in the evening and we want to take a driverless Uber, and it'll become convenient. We'll get used to it. And as we get used to it, so we'll use them more and more, and we'll begin to not drive so much. And in that, we will start to lose our driving skills. Eventually, self-driving cars will become far more reliable than human drivers, and insurance premiums will go up for those who are driving themselves rather than using self-driving. And eventually, at some point, Toby Walsh predicts, well, we'll say, what the hell, I don't care, and we'll give up driving completely. And the interesting comment he makes is that we will not even notice or care. Is this a presage for the world of architecture? I would argue there are two models we need to think about. Once you've got a self-driving car, you don't need a driver. Once you've got an AI system that can generate a design on its own, you don't need an architect. The message behind Lisa Doll is also very interesting. In 2019, having been beaten by AlphaGo in 2016, he gave up the game of Go with the comment, AI is an entity that cannot be defeated. Is this a comment about the future of architecture? And I'll finish off with my own particular kind of comment. What architects need to design right now is not another building, but the very future of their profession. It seems to me we are a very exciting and terrifying moment in the history of humanity, and especially the history of design. I'll simply sort of say, if you want to look further on some of these things on digital futures in our library, we have a series of discussions and debates and tutorials about how to use this. So with that, I will stop sharing, and I hope I haven't taken too long.
Thank you, Neil. There are clearly so many topics and points and angles that we could attack this conversation. Keeping up on the positive mood and being optimistic about the future. That's clearly the only way we can see this. But I would like to cover four main topics in the conversation here today. One is sustainability, the ability for this technology to help us delivering more sustainable, thoughtful projects. Another topic we'll be covering will be around intellectual property and unique design solutions. I want to cover also education and labor force, and also touch slightly on business operations. I'm convinced that in 3 months' time, when we go again to our next webinar, we will perhaps have already a little bit better clarity on the operations and the business model itself. So I think I'm going to start this by throwing a question to Enlai, because I think that I will circle back, start with a sustainability approach, and then circle back at the end back to this topic here, because it's just like AI. There's a let's call it a planetary impact to this. Both there's a technology that has a huge impact on society, but also there's a planetary issue with sustainability. And I would like to hear you. Wouldn't you say that AI will revolutionize everything the same way that it's boosting healthcare breakthroughs, or at least that's what we're expecting, that we will be able to achieve higher sustainable goals, perhaps even automate some of this output?
Whether we're able to and whether we will is a very different question. And I would almost say, like, you say revolutionize like it's a good thing, because there is a real question about, there's no doubt, and I don't feel that, at least personally, that there's any doubt about the instrumental power of AI. I think it's extraordinarily powerful, to a level, and extraordinarily unpredictable in many ways, to a level to which we've never dealt with before. So I would like to maybe think about it in terms of what a guy named Marshall McLuhan said about television, and or radio, and he said the medium is the message, which means that it doesn't really matter what you say on any particular medium. The medium itself has its own factors of success, and that those factors of success are going to guide culture much more strongly than anything that is done or said on that medium. So yes, we can do amazing sustainable things. We can render in ways that architects have not been able to render before. We can cast visions of the future in different ways. All of these things I totally agree with. What is concerning, actually, is that AI does not have a moral sensibility. It simply optimizes or allows us to achieve what we tell it to achieve and what to look for. The problem in that is that actually what we want are a series of goals, and what we give AI is a series of metrics or indicators. Now, this is what we call in the AI world an alignment problem, or it's an economic term actually, where the indicator that you're setting the AI to follow or track or optimize leads you away from the goal that you wanted in the first place and not towards it, because we are notoriously bad at creating a set of indicators that really matches what we want. So you hear this term, be careful what you ask for. When you hear that term in your own head, think of that like times a million with AI. And so let's say, for example, I'll finish very shortly, but let's say, for example, you use a deep learning algorithm to achieve a certain goal. But it's not just you doing it, it's everybody in the world doing it at the same time. So if we wanted to become better sustainability experts, we might say, okay, carbon is the goal. And we know that from the airline industry, they're saying, oh, well, if carbon is the goal, then we'll we'll use fields and grow our ethanol, and we'll make biodiesel for that. But of course, that'll reduce the carbon, but at the same time, what it will do is use all of the land, leave none of it left over for food, allow genetic modification to cause untold destruction to our biodiversity, but the carbon will be reduced. That's a classic alignment problem. Now, if you think of the speed at which AI can create these alignment problems and the instrumental power of AI, I would say that we have no idea at this point in time as humans of what sustainability actually is. And that's the problem.
Thank you. That was very interesting. Perhaps throwing this one to Jake now. I mean, Jake, you representing Effect, which is also a very forward-looking company, establishing yourselves as leaders in sustainable design thinking. Considering this particular topic of AI, have any of this potential been considered so far at Effect? So how serious have you been looking at it until now, since this almost feels that got everyone by surprise?
Well, thanks for the question, Tiago. It is something we've been looking into at Effect. You know, our office is rooted in design and in research. We look at these tools and we look at how it can shape the world around us and how we can help shape for the future. We've been looking at them on both individual task level and then also at project level, and then also firm level. I echo what Neil and what Enlay have said. It's very powerful. We don't know where it's going to go, so we're in the process of looking into these things. But it's for sure something where previously we would have to spend a few weeks researching something. Maybe we can shorten that time down quite a bit, but we still don't know how to control where it goes, and that'll be what we have to do next. And it's also affecting multiple, or has the potential to affect multiple things in our office, in that terms of how long do we spend writing a funding grant or approval, and writing that text and nailing it just right. For example, what might take someone a week to do 2 applications, maybe it takes them an afternoon to do 20. But it doesn't necessarily mean that we know exactly what's in there just yet. So it is something we're working with. It is coming from the side pretty fast, and we're embracing it and looking into it like on a personal level, an individual task, but also at what we're doing at a bigger level too.
So how would you rate the interest of the staff and the colleagues on the leadership, or the leadership, to participate actively in the discussion or in the transformation? Is it all in, or you are carefully looking at it from the sidelines?
I'd say it's some people are more interested on the personal level, and other people are probably dipping their toes into it. We have a lot of chatter on internal teams, kind of intranet, where we use people saying, hey, I've used this tool to check out this, or I've seen another firm is trying this, or we check this out for this task. We have people that sit on some projects, and probably a lot of you do, that maybe you spend a couple hundred hours on the door schedule. It would be really nice if we don't have to spend 100 hours on a door schedule that we know can be done a lot faster. That's a tiny little slice of where something like this could work. Or as I just mentioned, there'll be people that are writing grant applications. We do a lot of work that needs grant applications. It can take up a lot of time and takes you away from the main goal that you want to go to. But if you go back to Enlay's point, you have to make sure that you're still trying to focus somehow back on that goal, and you don't go down another path sometime. But people are interested. People are interested at a different level. People, I'd say, that spend a lot of time on site aren't really probably paying as much attention to something like AI, but people who are doing more computational work or form giving or that kind of work are also very interested, or people who are writing story with visuals or renderings are also very interested in it.
Interesting. Eliana, thank you, Jack. Eliana, what about at Kobe? I know we talked a little bit about this as well. You guys have positioned yourselves as specialists in this uniquely tailored, surprising solutions that appeal to the senses. So the question to you, following up on what Jake said, is on one hand, how are you incorporating AI creativity at firm level, and also you as head of computational design, what's your take in this disruptive technology, not just AI, but at large, and new ways to deal with the creative process?
Thank you. That's actually a very good question because it gives me the opportunity to tell you a bit more about Kobe. So one thing you need to know before we get to the core of your question is actually here we have a motto, which is we want to build future-proof architecture, urbanism, and landscape. And me as head of computational design, I have to add we want to build a future-proof workflows as well. So the point is, how can you be truly sustainable? How can you be like a future proof if you don't make sure that also your employees are working in the most efficient way? And in this sense, computational design methods actually allows you to basically be very flexible, adaptable. You can, and everyone in my field knows, you can basically totally take a script and use it for something similar, or you can take a part of it and build on top of that. And all these tools actually allows you to save a lot of time, especially on all those, boring, repetitive, machine-like tasks that actually don't require humans. And you rather spend that time on being creative, like on designing, than just, copying and pasting, for example. So this is something that I really care of, and I think of even as a professional. That's why with you in NORDFY, we are actually having this workshop with Rhino inside, with like bringing like connecting all these different words. This is another issue that we have, like how we actually keep a consistent, streamlined, easy process. So already with these few things that I told you, you can understand that actually Kobe is very much interested into new technologies. And we had already a few office meetings where we were actually talking about ChatGPT, Midjourney, DALL-E, and we even had a beautiful exhibition that basically was made of images produced both from Midjourney and DALL-E, and they were based on prompts that were the description of our existing projects. And that was a lot of fun and created a lot of engagement. So we have this kind of creative impulse. That's why we are already using text to image in the early phases of design. Of course, it's not like spread all over, but it's something we are very interested in. And me as a head of computational design, with like this set of skills, as many other people in my field, I've been wondering, how do we bring these images in the real world? And there are, of course, a lot of techniques that you can use in order to translate those images into 3D. So you can have a point cloud, meshes, and this is like the direction where the technology is going. If you think of a point E, for example, where you are able to prompt and you can get a point cloud. So that's super interesting. And of course, it's an ongoing research from my side and many other people. And I will finish with one note. I think one of the most interesting aspects right now into the text to image, and of course, I completely agree that's not absolutely the only thing, and I will probably share also other thoughts about it. It's that you can actually look into those like some kind of profoundly architectural features, and you will notice that they are mixed up in an unexpected way. And looking at those, you can actually somehow trace the main curves, like understand the geometry, the principles, and you can bring architectonical order through scripts. So somehow it's very interesting right now to use that as an input for your design.
Yes, that's super interesting. We will go back again to some of the points that you just mentioned now, but I think I'll pass the ball to Jens, because I think there's also something there that I want to stress, that you guys at BIG, I want to hear how do you, Neil just said that he presented something to BIG last week. I want to hear how is BIG watching these events and unfolding. On one hand, we have this paradigm shift between the way we approach unique design solutions, and BIG has proven to be master of design surprise. And on the other hand, there's the potential of training generic models that can easily be replicated globally. So how do you stand on these two legs of the benefits of automation versus the very peculiar style that perhaps BIG has pushed in the last 15 years that perhaps is training someone else's models?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think it's it's where obviously we're constantly looking towards what's next and what's the future, and hence we're also obviously investing a fair amount of time and energy into sort of following and looking into AI as we speak, and have been for the last year or two. But obviously we're also at the same time sort of we're following without doing a ton of development, because I think it's at the moment AI is sort of like you need a lot of first of all you need a lot of money to do like sort of real in-depth development. You also need like some very, very bright AI driven scientist people to do so. You need a ton of data and you need a ton of computing power, which is hard to get for architects, or at least like very, very few architects on the planet have all those available. Sort of so I guess there is a limitation to what we can develop in-house as we speak. I'm sure that's going to change, and we're more accessible and more easy for us to also train our own data sets and train our own models on our own data sets and so on. So, and it is something we're definitely thinking about, and we're looking towards, like how can we in the future, train our own models based on our own in-house data, whether it's images or text or 3D models. So I think at the moment we're at a point where we're following along. We're also doing a number of in-house sort of tests and things like, and quickly scrolling through LinkedIn, you can easily see that we're no means the only ones doing this. Like the majority of our competitors are doing something along the same lines. So we're not sticking out in any way in that sense. But yeah, we're looking into things like sketches and scribbles, converting those. We're looking into the whole, like how can we convert the 2D images from Midjourney and similar into 3D, etc. And obviously, I'm looking very much forward to the day where we can actually have Midjourney generate the same design or the same idea from different angles, so we can actually start turning that into a point cloud kind of style. We're not there yet, but I'm sure we will get there. So I guess in essence, we're definitely sort of keen on it, and we're following very closely. But I also got to say at the same time, and this is not to sound sort of skeptical in any way, because I'm certainly sort of positive on the AI side, but I've also seen a number of things shown to me that are very sort of like AC specific, that are far off being anywhere near something for us to use. It's maybe useful for a developer to do a square parking lot or a square office build, but it's tools that are not creating any sort of design as we speak. It's like square centralized core, square boring office blocks with no kind of design to it at the moment. I'm it might come in a few years' time, but at least the various different tools I've seen so far, there is none of them that really gets me sort of worried about my job tomorrow or in the coming month at least. I mean, again, I could be wrong, and I'd love if I was wrong in a way, but at least there's, you know, ChatGPT, Midjourney, and others are obviously super impressive for what it is. But if we're looking more towards sort of like AEC specific tools, I think a lot of them are, you know, there's a lot of good ideas out there, but at least for us with and also the other firms on this talk today, we all do architecture that are so complex and so, you know, different in the shape and form that a lot of these models and a lot of these tools would have a hard time applying what they do to what we do as we speak. But we're excited about it for sure.
Yeah, I see your point. I mean, I think we're going to go into a particular topic of ethics and copyright and so on. But you're touching on something that it's interesting because maybe provocative in that sense that I bounced the question to you, because I think that BIG is renowned for its unconventional design choices, and you just mentioned about complex geometry, very peculiar design solutions that are.
And maybe on that note, I forgot to mention, you asked about the whole style and provocative ideas and so on. Like, obviously, the other thing we don't want to do is end up creating Midjourney architecture, and we don't want to end up creating what everyone else is doing. So there's also a level of, we think it's great, and we use it for mood boards and ideas and so on. But at the same time, we obviously see it more as currently as an assistant. We still want to maintain our philosophy and our DNA of being big.
And that's why I think we're going to go back to this topic in a little while of these unique solutions that you have, because I mean, I think all the way from the inception of Plot with maybe the VM houses to the Twist Museum, these are very peculiar, one could almost say site-sensitive solutions, but the style can be replicated by others worldwide, which in my world, there's no issue over there. I mean, B.B. King has been copied a gazillion of times in blues music, so why not inspire the others? But maybe you said something that you are not impressed yet, and what you have seen on the AC industry is, and I think I follow your point, but maybe I would bounce back to Neil, because he has been showcasing these tools, and I would ask maybe the question to you. I mean, we all are witnessing the speed of development in this field, and some say that we are 3 times Moore's law speed of technology developments. And I just saw today the comparison between Midjourney 1 year ago and Midjourney today. Are you impressed by the AEC tools that are in the market now, or do you even have any insights on, are we at the brink of even a Cambrian explosion? Because these models are now starting to be open source. Stable Diffusion is going to put out their own language models available for everyone to build upon. What's your take here?
Well, but maybe I didn't stress it enough, but one thing I was trying to say is forget Midjourney, forget these diffusion platforms, because frankly, they're limiting us, they're trapping us. There are things in the pipeline. Now, this is the important point. There are things in the pipeline that will come on stream in 3 to 5 years' time that will radically change every single architectural, the operation of every single architectural practice. Those things have been developed, and that's the important thing. Right now, what's happening, maybe just so I should go back to what happened 2 weeks ago. We had a discussion, a roundtable with Patrick Schumacher from Zaha and Daniel Bolojan from Corp Immobilier. Patrick's now using these things to ideate, to sketch and things. I'm sure most people are doing that. But there's a limitation there, because these tools have got written into them certain aesthetic preferences that don't necessarily accord with a particular practice. What they're doing in Corp Immobilier is, first of all, they are not using images, they're using parameters. In other words, they're using data that's more holistically understanding what's going on. And that allows them to produce things where you don't get a mismatch between inside and out, between side elevations and front elevation. It's all being kind of coordinated, and that is the way forward. Now, the problem here is that basically, well, who is developing these tools? They're doing it for the in-house, and they're customizing it. So instead of having the kind of preferences you might get on Midjourney, they're getting their own aesthetic preferences, and so on and so on and so on and so on. But the problem is it's only for them, right? So I had a discussion a few days ago with Autodesk on their Foresight team, and they're really looking at this, not the diffusion platforms. They're looking at what the tools will be available very soon. Now, there's that. Also, I would say Xcool, which is, I think, the world leader. I had a discussion with SpaceMaker a while back, and I think Xcool are ahead for many reasons. But they are, I mean, they're producing something only for the Chinese market because the data is specific to China. They tried using Japanese data, but it had all the Japanese building codes written into it and didn't sort of work. So the question is who is going to have access to some of these tools? But my point is, really, we need to step beyond Midjourney. That's nothing. It's just a sketching tool. It means nothing. It's kind of useful for ideation, but nothing more than that. And really think about what's coming down the pipeline, because if we're not aware of that, we're going to get a shock. So that's my point. And just another comment. I mean, there's nothing bad about AI at all. It's a question of who uses it and for what. And that is the question of ethics and how we use it. So it's our responsibility in the sense to use it in the right kind of way. But anyway, there are a lot of questions there, but let me leave it at that.
Yes, certainly. I mean, I think you just said two things that are for me. I just took note. I mean, it reminds me of Elon Musk last week saying that that AI will hit people like an asteroid. And Lai, you want to say something? Go ahead.
I totally agree with Neil, as a matter of fact, in this, and I feel like, you know, within about 6 months, maybe 2 years' time, it doesn't really matter, this conversation will seem extraordinarily dated, because what we are dealing with in both in the AEC industry, architecture and engineering, are two fields that are heavily contingent upon parameters. So especially engineering, I would say even more than architecture, is a parameter space. And when you look at what happened in the 90s with Deep Blue and chess, and then with Lee Sedol and Go, chess and Go are essentially just closed parameter spaces. That's what you would maybe call narrow or specialized AI, where all AI has to do is play against itself and learn from its own moves within a very closed parameter space. And what AI is becoming able to do is work with more and more multi-objective parameterization tasks, so that it can value one against another. And that's the thing, that when you have an industry like engineering, which is essentially relying on people's calculations of a limited range of parameters, that will disappear fairly quickly. But what we're realizing already with general adversarial networks, GANs, or diffusion techniques, or neurolinguistic programming models, all of these things, we're starting to relearn as a profession or as a industry what parameters look like and what they could be. Because the difficulty that we have in our profession is, and I think in our education system, is a very limited understanding of what parameters are. And that guides our sort of like closed-mindedness as to how effective AI could be at replacing most of what we do. The difficulty for architects and engineers is to realign what their role is. And I challenge Neil in the proposition that there'll be no role for a person that occupies the role of an architect. It just will be that the architect will be a completely different entity as to what it is today. What could be extremely problematic is if there are planning laws, sustainability goals, ideas of taste that are somehow embodied in the AI that take away agency from people. And this is very, very likely to happen, whereby you get this dual problem. Number one, that AI will act so accurately and so fast that people will resort to using AI as being proof rather than a generator of an idea. And then secondly, and that will, people will essentially willingly hand over agency to AI. But the problem is if the goal is not exactly what we want as a society, that will have extraordinary consequences. And then the second part, I think, is that efficiency as a profession will become immaterial. So, replacing this notion of, doing window or door schedules, or what it is that we're struggling now and what we're using, what I don't think we could call it artificial intelligence anymore, but certain types of optimization. I don't think we'll have that conversation in about a year's time. I think efficiency won't be the thing that we have to worry about. It will be the ability to preserve critical agency as a society when the people that are constructing the AI or feeding it with its learning data are essentially creating the quality of output that we'll be working with. And it's what we feed into the system and what targets we ask it to choose, which will be the thing that makes or breaks our society. And then last point is that the people who are hosting the AI and writing the code, it's not the code itself, because we don't necessarily know what happens within that neural processing systems, but it's the hosting of that AI which will allow you to harvest the data that's coming through the way that it's used. And it's those that harvest the data which will have most power in the industry, not the architects or any individual user.
Thank you, Enlai.
All right, that's enough.
Yeah, I'm going to shift a little bit. I mean, we could go on. I also agree with a lot of what you're saying anyway, but I will bounce it to David, which an hour into the webinar haven't had the opportunity yet. David, I mean, this integration of AI tools and big data can indeed also be seen as an augmented capacity, right? I mean, Neil and so many others are talking about those that use AI will replace those that aren't using. It does present some challenges for architects, of course, who need to consider how documentation, modeling, data management, etc., can be processed, curated, and automated. So my question to you would be, in your opinion, how can AI be incorporated into BIM processes? And what benefits you think that will benefit the industry, with our limited knowledge that in one year it will be dated and all of this, but as we see it today?
Yeah, I think from our side, we're sitting on this mountain of unused data. We've done so many projects over the past 60 years of the office, and how can we leverage that? How can we use that and learn from what we've done in the past to automate and benefit what we do in the future? And I think that when we look at a lot of our processes, there's a lot of click-heavy work still in architecture. And how can we remove that click-heavy work and use people for what they're best at, and really kind of redistribute how people are used on projects and how we can take best advantage of the time? Because we can also see that the projects we get, there's more work and less money to do the projects. So how can we use this technology to make our bottom line work out better in the future? Because I think that using these tools is really the key. Like, I don't see in the future, in the next maybe several years, that it's going to take away jobs, but I think that it has a capacity to redistribute jobs. And I think when we also look at BIM workflows and kind of this communication across all of the stakeholders, I think it can also improve that as well. That it can maybe predict what the needs of the project are in the future, based on what you've done in the past. So I think this is going to be a huge way of leveraging the industry and potentially just improve the work that we do and better, so we can take better advantage of the time that we have available. And I think it's also going to be an eye opener for new architects coming into the industry, because I think that you'll have like two parts. You'll have some people who are training and developing the AIs, and then you'll have the other people who are trying to leverage the AI, because we can't expect that everybody coming out of schools to be architects will be creating their own AIs. I think that each office will maybe have their own AI that they create. And I think that it's going to be very interesting what's happening in the future, especially with education and people coming out of school and starting up and seeing how they use the tools we've used in the past. And I think that one thing we have to also remember with this is that we're building buildings for people, that somehow we still have to have the person in the process. We can use all these tools to save time and generate better designs, but I think that somehow we need to remember we're doing this for people. We're not building buildings for machines unless we're talking about data centers. So I think it's going to be really a fascinating time.
Yeah, absolutely. Data centers and Tesla factories, for sure. But before Neil mentioned something, I think was important. Was he said all is coordinated. So I'm gonna touch a little bit on the interoperability, I think. But maybe, I mean, you dodged a little bit between the AI and BIM, so to speak, David. But Jens, this one goes your direction. In this same topic, despite all the progress and the promises, the expectations of BIM has often been greater than actually being practiced. Perhaps viewing it from the Danish standpoint, at least. There are countless of examples where people has been using BIM software, such as Revit, just as a drafting tool, and missing out the true opportunity that it's and the potential that it's behind this interoperability. And Neil just said all is interconnected. However, with AI, big data-based neural networks can predict complex outcomes. So we suddenly introduce a new flavor here, which is the predictability. Neil also talked about AlphaGo, and to me it's fascinating that situation where the people, the presenters got surprised and thought it was a mistake. That was like, what the hell are this guy? What was this move? They couldn't see it coming. So there's some interesting points to the predictability, but also the unexpected, right? So have you considered at all, you or yourself or at BIG, to implement this consideration of predictability into the interconnected workflow? I don't even know if this makes sense, but
it does in a way, and I think the answer is yes, for sure. Actually, one of my colleagues, Alex, him and a colleague, I think it was last year not this year, but the previous hackathon in Copenhagen, they actually did a small little project where they were predicting sort of sun analysis and so on in buildings based on a data set. I know it was not like sort of like maybe machine learning in the big sense, but like obviously the whole thing of sort of surrogate models and being able to predict simulations, etc. I think that's super interesting, and I could easily see that become a thing, a more widespread thing in the early stages and in concept. Also for things like LCA, we're currently, as many other firms are, we're currently working on our own internal LCA system or tool, and which we build primarily because of the concept phases, and obviously if we were able to actually build it in a way where it could based on previous data and previous projects, it could predict if you choose this material, then you're likely to have this sort of footprint, etc. I think that would be hugely interesting. And also from, like you mentioned, BIM, and I think you're right about the sort of like what you said about that there's been a promise and maybe some failed examples of the use of BIM in a way. Again, back to predicting, I think, for instance, from an annotation point of view, I could certainly see the use case for having an AI-driven annotation engine where you could actually sort of have it place the annotation, whether it's tags or dimensions, etc. And I know there's already a few in the market that are along those lines. Again, I'm not going to mention names here, but what I've seen so far is not fitting for what we need at the moment. They fail as soon as things are not on a straight line and shaped as a box, then it typically doesn't really work. But I'm sure we'll get there. And for instance, I used a couple of years ago, I worked at Foster's where we had this tower we were working on that we're tapering towards the top, and we had this like 80 something 65 floor plans that we needed to tag in a certain way. And we actually ended up having 4 girls who were sitting and placing these tags for a whole week to annotate these floor plans. And that is one of those cases where it would have been amazing if we could just do one floor plan and then have the AI sort of do the rest based on the prediction of how we place the tags or the dimensions on the first one. So certainly, I just don't think we're there yet with those tools for the AC industry. It will come.
Yeah, it will certainly come, and probably much faster than we are expecting. David, back to you on the same topic of prediction and operability. I mean, you have been a pioneer in the Danish market for sure. You have been light years ahead of us for as far as I'm concerned, and you probably more than everyone has seen this BIM potential being untapped, or the untapped potential of BIM. How do you see this transition in the design process towards like this real-time interaction across participants, across disciplines, enhanced perhaps by immersive realities? How do you think of all of this coming finally, hopefully, all coming together?
Yeah, I think this has also potential for that as well. I think we're still at a stage after being using these tools for so many years that interoperability is still being a challenge. And I think that through AI and these new technologies that we have this chance of kind of, instead of working file-centric, working more data-centric and sharing the information that's needed across all the stakeholders, and also at the same time being an enabler for also VR and AR, and using that as maybe a way of that you design a piece and then it makes a prediction of what that piece is, and coming up with options much quicker, where someone from the human side can make a decision and then take that and then take it to the next level as well. So I think that we can also be able to work in multiple tools at the same time and come out with a single outcome on the end. And I think that we're getting pretty close, but I think there's still a long ways to go when we talk about interoperability like this.
So you see, if I missed the last part over there. So you think that we are still a little bit away from true interoperability, and perhaps even more on an immersive level?
Yeah, because I think that if everybody is working in tools that they've used, they're combined into a central data hub and then put into an augmented world or a virtual world, then we have this chance of a higher level of collaboration. Because I think right now when we're doing collaboration in BIM workflows, we're all working in our own silos and we're sharing these files with each other, and it's not as fluid as it could be. And sometimes maybe fluidity is not the greatest thing, because then there's no checks of the work that's being shared across all the stakeholders. But I think in the early design stages that you really would have this kind of possibility of a very intuitive, very ingenious way of working, that I can work in the tool that I'm best at, you can work in the tool that you're best at working, and we can combine this into a single project in the end. And I think that it's really kind of, how do we come out of our silos between different, it could be between different architects or between different disciplines within the AEC industry. And it's really kind of bringing these worlds together and working in a collaborative way. I think if you kind of look at the Minecraft example, where you could have multiple users in a single world developing a project together. I think that's kind of where we could be heading, and I can see that happening in the next generation of people coming out of the universities, because our kids have been growing up in the Minecraft world of working together, building these virtual worlds, and I think that's the way the tools will be developed in the future.
Absolutely, I'm completely. I think also the whole gaming experience for younger generations will be a major shift. I'll go to education in a little while, but now you just said something that I want to ask Jake about it. At some point, Jake, you mentioned something about the people from the office that are working on site are less, at least maybe currently less impacted or less interested or whatever. So perhaps a very generic question, but from an operation standpoint, where do you see right now in the short term, perhaps, this interoperability or automation having an impact on the workflow or on the operations? Anything particular that you look at it from business performance standpoint or people performance? How would that?
I think maybe we've talked about it a bit before, but our industry, at least the construction side of it, is actually kind of slow to react to many of these things. Sometimes a lot slower than other industries. I think, and that's a broad kind of statement. We do see some clients or some projects which take things very fast to an extreme level, but in the majority of things, you can go to job sites and they look very much like they did 20 years ago for a large part of a job site. Whereas I think what we're going to see is a push probably more from architects, engineers, and similar types to push the industry in one way. We'll have some clients, maybe Neil, you mentioned something like that about clients or some software providers who are going to push from another side, and then eventually things will happen. But I can see individual firms and perhaps firms that are represented here, have more ability to put resources into it that'll target their own workflow and find ways to tag buildings for 60 floors faster, or as David said, spend time where our value is best spent rather than clicking. Then I think some of that will just trickle into other parts of the industry. I mean, once you can get a client in a immersive environment to see the building or the environment that you're designing with them, things can get communicated a lot faster. So I think for some of these things, it'll help communication. But a large part of what we do is, in general, is talk to people. And, like we talked earlier, it's about people, what we're doing. But if that means getting stakeholders to make decisions in a more clear and efficient way, that's, I think, also where this technology will lead to. So I think it's going to take lots of different forms. I don't think it's going to come from just one side. At least that's what I think. I don't know, unless one giant contractor or client comes out there and says, this is how everything's going to be done from now. I think it's going to be poked a lot from all kinds of sides.
Yeah. Eliana, giving you the spotlight again and changing gears a little bit more into the, as David said, the early design stages, more early conceptual design, because I think this is also where human intuition and critical thinking will be fundamental, despite the tools, despite the technology, the sensibility of the approach. I mean, you are an expert on computational design, and personally, the past years has been amazing to witness the whole 3D programming language as Grasshopper being integrated into the workflow, the designs becoming more complex and more exciting, one could say. But it seems to me that now we are entering next level parametric. Maybe back to what Enlai was talking also about, like everything is so parameterized that it will have a huge impact anyway. Do you have any takes on how is AI influencing the field of computational design in architecture, specifically in early stages? You really see, press a couple of buttons and everything will just be there for you?
So first of all, I want to say this is really a beautiful conversation, like very inspiring. So many things actually are resonating with me and what I think. So first of all, I'm just speculating based on my experience and all the tests that I've been running with this technology. And as I told you, I have a very much like holistic approach to computational design. So I do believe that we can conceive the design through scripts, and then we can iterate the design with the algorithms, and we can target different things. And of course, right now, deep learning is like a critical mutation. Like this is really a giant leap, and definitely is going way beyond what we are used to work with. So I actually believe that we are going to operate in a computational design with a speed that I cannot even wrap my head around right now. So maybe we are going to be like able to keep together so many different goals that we have. And but despite that, because I actually agree that like the values, the morality are like very crucial. Like so those are going to be like really important. I think one very good thing happening with AIs is that the computational design is going to become even more intuitive, which means that the computational design is going to be truly democratic. And this is actually what I really like, because computational design should never be like something just for a few experts. Like it doesn't make sense. I think that we have to share tools so everyone can actually be empowered and become more efficient. So in this sense, I think that the AI is gonna like kind of give more power to everyone, and that's definitely a very good thing. Yeah, and actually one note, and it's not just about our offices. I was thinking that in developing countries they cannot actually buy powerful computers with like crazy GPU. So it's going to be very disruptive for our industry. The fact that also all these people are going to come in play, and they're going to be able to do this like all these things in real time. I think that's wonderful.
Yeah, the thing with the real time reminds me a little bit of what David was also talking about, the immersive experience. It also comes down to data and connection. And I mean, I don't know how many people currently on this webinar, but for sure more than 200 people. And connection keeps failing once in a while. So there are some steps to go also when it comes to latency in the technology development. But there is no doubt that there has been this surge in the popularity of generative design tools. And despite Niels saying that we need to forget about the whole mid journeys and all of that, I mean, YouTube became an infinite source of knowledge and people sharing ideas and sharing their work. You particularly, Eliana, you share your experience on online training as well. So I wanted to shift slightly the conversation to education and skill set. Maybe perhaps ask you, Eliana, on what do you think would be, considering the advancement of technology, what are the most important skills that future designers, young designers, students should be considering to master this ability of curating design? Perhaps when everything is automated, you are just a curator of designs.
So I would answer this question a few months ago in a completely different way, because I'm, of course, a person who also believes that technical skills are super important, because you cannot really, express your creativity if you don't know how to use well the tools. Like you have some limitations. So it's very important to be able to use the softwares. And on the other side, I'm also like a person who likes to work with good people who are very creative and curious. So what I think like it's gonna happen is that the most important skills are gonna be the soft ones. Like you wanna definitely hire someone who is very, very curious, like someone who is not afraid to shift and adapt to new technologies. Because the truth is, yeah, today we have Midjourney, we have DALL-E, but we already experienced that if we scroll through our LinkedIn, there are so many things that are coming out. Like I'm used to check everything that is, all the new plugins for Grasshopper, but this is just going into a double exponential curve. So it's insane how many new things are coming out. So I think it's going to be crucial to find someone who is not afraid to challenge themselves and is able to jump on just explore new tools. And of course, it's super important to give value to what kind of morality, what kind of vision of architecture these people have, because more and more these tools are going to give us options. So it means that you want to find someone who is good in decision making, because at the end of the day, like already with Midjourney, it gives you options and you have to decide which one to variate, which one to upscale. And if we think that at one point we are going to prompt something and we are going to get a 3D out of it, let's say, that like responds to all our goals, well, that's not enough. Because, for example, you might need to walk around this building. So maybe it's going to be possible now in virtual reality, like you go around, you walk around, and then as a human, you also have to understand what kind of social values, what kind of meaningful interactions we are creating. So I think definitely decision making is going to be crucial.
Thank you, Neil. I mean, this is a bold one, and I'll try to be short. We are a little bit almost to the 1.5 hour mark. But I mean, we are under the assumption, not sure if incorrectly, but that the speed of development in technology is so incredibly fast that academia will have a really hard time to catch up. And at the same time, a whole new set of skills are required. I totally agree with Eliana that soft skills, critical thinking is one of them. Yet, you were talking about 80-20 job deflation, which will affect, of course, also education. Yet a large part of our culture and our social skill, our inspiration is built and forged at university, at the different courses with the different mentors and teachers. Recently here in Denmark has been a short debate about education and the proposal to shorten architectural education, or at least offering shorter educations and integrating it more with a practice. What is your take on this challenging point of education and training and this new skill set in this very, very fast-paced environment we are?
Yeah, I mean, I think if there's a potential crisis, and of course there are opportunities too, but there's a crisis, I think, in terms of the way that we can operate as architects. The bigger crisis, I think, is in education, because we're talking about the future. We are teaching the generation that's going to be out there when the singularity, if it happens, going to happen. And I think that's crucially important. And maybe, I don't know whether we're going to have fewer architects. I think for sure when we can't say we're going to have the same. Things are bound to change. But if we are going to have fewer architects, then we're going to have fewer students. And what's more, if we have these tools that are shortening or making things easier, why do we need to study for 5 years when these tools can do most of those jobs? If we're not going to have licensing, then maybe that's also going to change everything. So I think that the education's really at the kind of the forefront of everything. But the biggest problem, and frankly, I mean, we get dinosaurs in most schools of architecture anyway. I studied at Cambridge, where they banned computation, and they just produced a generation of graduates who were unable to find jobs. So we need to have people employed. But the point is, who is going to be on top of these things when they're happening so fast? So one of the things we're trying to do Digital Futures is to have a kind of global classroom where we bring together the people who actually know what's happening right now and make that information available right across the globe, literally across the globe, and leave recordings out there and so on, because it's impossible. It's impossible. We had a session, and but we had a series of 5 tutorials on how we can use these tools and use them for 3 dimensions and for videos and whatever else. By the time we'd finished it, it was completely out of date. And so how are you going to teach that? The only way to do it is to have a shared platform to look at these things. But I think education, frankly, is the area that's going to struggling most, not least because I think already people are questioning whether they need to spend, especially in the States, $250,000 on their education. So there are huge challenges, and we've got to be alert to these things. I just want to add one small comment to what we were saying. I think the point is that in the office itself, we don't know what's going on because most of the people developing this are not disclosing what they're doing. I happen to know because one of my doctoral candidates is doing this, but I can't show you what she's shown me because she's not allowed to show it to anyone else, and so on and so on and so on. I think in the office of Corp Himmelblau, they are really very advanced, and I would really recommend have a look at the roundtable where Daniel Bollinger talks about what they're doing because they're ahead of the curve, but even they're not disclosing what they're doing because they're trying to keep it all private. So the real problem is that we don't have access to the information, but trust me, there are things that are being developed that will really radically change things. And if we remain locked into a discussion of Mid-Journey and images, we're going nowhere. We have to get to the next step, and those steps are being kind of produced right now. We should be customizing what we're doing as they're doing Corp Himmelblau, and that takes a lot of work to customize and to make sure that you get AI to work for you. But it's a huge problem, and we've got to be alert to these things. I don't know what the answer is, but the first step is to be aware of the problem, because once you're aware of the problem, it's not a problem by which you are trapped. It's one that you can begin to address. So we must be really not be ostriches with our head in the sand. We've got to realize these things are on the horizon and they're going to happen.
Absolutely. And Lai, you want to contribute here?
Yes, I would actually support Eliana's statement insofar as there's going to be a greater need, actually, not a lesser need for expertise, because when you have these ever more powerful and greater productions of creative output from, let's say, for example, an AI system, then the question becomes, how do you value that output? And I think that is going to be the biggest challenge of our industry, is actually not the use of the tools as much as it is the valuation of the output that comes. Because when something is produced, how do you know whether it really is what you want and what you need? And how do you know, like if an engineering calculation is performed or an architectural form is created, how do you then read into that and see whether it is or it is not suiting your total series of goals? And you need expertise for that. When computers started doing calculations, the most robust way of dealing with that is to expect an outcome. And if the computer gave you a very different outcome, then you would be able to either question yourself or question the computer, but you have to have an expectation. And so that's the thing that I think we'll have to do with AI, is work out how we craft these expectations.
Jens, I know that you have to leave us soon, so I'll throw you one last question for you. In this topic of education and training people and the new skill set and so on, if you have to guess from a big standpoint, who are the next generation design leaders?
Good question. I mean, personally, I would have loved to have more coding background in my sort of education back in the days. Just in general, not only in uni but also further back some. And I think it was Jake or someone who mentioned that there's a lot of children these days that are playing Minecraft and similar. So I'm sure we're a generation of more code-heavy youngsters than we maybe have seen in the past. So I'd say coding would definitely be a thing I would be expecting to see a lot more in the coming years. But it's always a combination, because the very code-heavy people might not always be the beginners and vice versa. So it's like it always, it's I think it's, I don't want to sit and generalize things too much, to be honest. I think there is always a need for different skill sets and different people, and you know, it's I think it's tricky to just say that everyone will need to know this or that, because then we will also end up with all the same designs or the same things. So it's like I think we need to keep a little bit of sort of diversity in things. But I think it is a good question, and I think it but I'm kind of, you know, I think we'll see a rise in 3D savvy youngsters that are coming into uni and so on, you know, that are already, you know, well beyond where I was, for instance, when I uni. Yeah. But it is tricky, and then there's as I forgot who that mentioned it, but there is a, you know, sea of tools already, and it's only rising. I think it was Liana who mentioned that, like the amount of plugins and tools that are coming out these days are just, you know, ever increasing, and obviously from my personal point of view here, it's obviously what I need to sit and try and navigate on a daily basis, because I have a ton of people that are coming with all sorts of tools they want to try out and test and do, and you know, like I don't have the credit card here to just sign up for all subscriptions and all tools that gets available. So we have to be selective about what we trust and what we go with and what we think is actually going to be the right thing to pursue. Sometimes we're wrong. Sometimes we go in the right direction. But it's ever increasing, and it's getting, you know, highly complex. And I think about it almost every day and night in a way.
Anyway, thank you.
But yeah, you're right. I need to run soon, so if I'm dropping off, it's not you know, to be.
Excuse. Thank you so much for participating. Jake, we are close to start wrapping it up. But Jake, now touching a little bit on this point of the skills and education and training and so on, from business operations standpoint and human resource standpoint, I guess you see, of course, the benefits of automation and implementation of these tools. Also, of course, the challenges. But do you see, and I know you're not probably here to represent HR managers at large, but do you see the need to reevaluate perhaps career path, career guidance at studio level? I mean, there's this compulsory year employee review that needs to be taken at studio level. So what do you think needs to be reevaluated, perhaps from a career path standpoint?
Well, that's a big question. We could take a long time, but I would definitely echo what Eliana said first. And I think Enlay backed up, is curiosity is really super important. Whether you went to architecture school 100 years ago or 50 years ago or 20 years ago, there'll always be some new tools out there, right? And when we're talking to people and working with people, it's curiosity and energy that we're usually mostly working with. And if those people work best with one tool or another, that's what we're going to try to find and work with them on. But I mean, there's always been a big disconnect about what happens in school, what happens in the profession, Jens, what clients want. And then I think the new thing we don't really have our hands on is actually what technology can do. Right, and now we've got to disconnect on like 4 separate things. So that can be difficult to manage at all times. But you know, I would imagine that we're going to get situations where things are going to move a lot faster. And you may have someone at the beginning of the year saying, my goals for this year are to do this. And halfway through the year, they're like, well, we don't even need to do that really that much anymore. I have clients asking for this now. We have problems here that we need to solve immediately. We need new partnerships, or we need new ways to engage with software or tools, or we have sensors now on site that are telling us this. We need a new way to react to that. So I think, again, it goes back to curiosity, people who are really motivated and interested. And, you know, when we're setting goals like, you know, developing the world that's better for all of us, then we can just move ahead with those goals. And if it means that we are using AI to do this tool, or Revit to do this tool than it, or Grasshopper to do other tools. I don't think that that's going to change. That's constantly going to happen, that part.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was planning on asking something else also on this topic, but I think we need to start wrapping up here. And there's a couple of questions that our attendees are putting up, and I would like to start throwing those to you. But just before we go into those questions from the audience, maybe getting Neil again on board here with a point that it's perhaps subjective, which is morality. We handpicked this group of professionals. They represent highly awarded Danish studios, where we typically see them with a high caliber of design uniqueness. How do you see this transition where there has been more empirical approach to the profession that you have built upon this luggage historic? David said we have 60 years of data that we need to somehow figure out how to tap into it. But at the same time, all this data is out there, and there's a lot of conversation online about intellectual property and stuff like that. So, and Liliana was talking about morality, the importance of morality. The whole copying is a huge issue worldwide. Different cultures have different approach to it. What do we want to throw a couple of words into intellectual property, machine learning, ethical questions, and so on?
Sure. Can I just make one small point about tools, first of all? I think that in my book, I talk about two different tendencies. One is tools get easier, right? You get swiping on your phone, you can use facial recognition to open it and things. The more advanced technology gets, at some level, it gets easier. And we've gone from coding to Grasshopper to these diffusion platforms that are easier and easier and easier. So that's one tendency. The other tendency, though, is that you really need what Randy Deutsch calls super users, the ones who are going to come in and customize your data set for your particular practice. So I think they're going to be both, right? They're going to be both of these things. So I just put that out there. In terms of tools, I mean, an ethical use of the tools, and there's also the question about bias, right? I mean, the data is biased, but that comes from us. That comes from us. I think that, obviously it's a question ultimately of who uses the tool and for what. I've got a kitchen knife. I can either use that to cut up my vegetables or I can murder someone. You don't blame the tool, right? I've never seen a kitchen knife being convicted of murder. It's a question of how we use it. And for sure, we've got to be very careful with these things because they could be used in the wrong way. So there's no question about that. In terms of copying, well, frankly, I think humans copy more than AI does. AI just searches and synthesizes. That's all it does. There is an issue, though, and I've been part of discussions at MIT Media Lab and Harvard about the way in which people have been scraping copyrighted material from the internet. Now, that's not something I can deal with. That's a legal question and so on. But I think that, my problem about architects is that we're not as original as we want. We copy everyone else, right? There's a canon of architecture. You've got to somehow be like, Big or Zaha or whatever. And if you're the same, that's copying. But if you're slightly different, that's okay. But if you design something radical like a pineapple, you failed your architecture course. So we all copy the whole time, right? It's fundamental to human beings. So no, I don't think we should blame that. We should be aware of what we're doing as human beings and take responsibility for that, for sure.
That was a good one. So lots of opportunities for pineapple architecture over there. But I mean, I think I was probably more thinking on straight out rip-off. That until now, every time I've this situation has happened a lot of times where architects get really annoyed that someone just copied their building and it's a straight rip-off, and this is unacceptable. But I see, I don't know if I want to call it a risk or threat. That and you also said that the platforms are getting so easy. I mean, until now, you had to be a specialist, a technician to be. I mean, I remember the first time I opened 3D Max. I thought I will never manage this. Now you have UX design that it's really, really easy to use. So we again democratizing creativity in an unprecedented level. But I'm also thinking, and that's why I was posing that question, and I don't know if it's a legal question or if it's a creative question, but I see the possibility of a public developer or private developer to, you know, speak to Alexa or to Siri and say, can I have a Frank Gehry building? I have this site, and by the way, resolve all these complex geometrical conflicts because I don't want to have any liability and stay on budget, read the contract, whatever. Do all of this automated, generic, perhaps, but vast majority of the world couldn't perhaps care less about this authenticity point, and bypass the conventional approach to the practice. And to your point, the only 20% of the architects are left to do authentic design, while the majority perhaps is using a more generalized approach to it.
I mean, if you try and actually control it, and the point that you actually get a replication of a particular building, it's almost impossible. I showed you some projects at the beginning. There was one with the yellow colors on, which actually were based on Mies van der Rohe's Barcelona Pavilion. You will never get Mies van der Rohe's Barcelona Pavilion. You will get a kind of shape grammar sort of view of it, where all the components are reassembled in a different kind of way, kind of inventively, but you can't actually get the original thing. So I don't think that's the case. What I would just say that if I'm using one of those in my prompt, I don't use, say, Zaha. I take how Patrick describes what they're doing in Zaha, put those words into the prompt, and that gives you something far more interesting than the name Zaha.
No, that was a good one. Well, I would say, Enla, we need to get some of the questions from the audience, but go ahead, very short. Enla, what are you thinking of?
I'll be very short. They do copy buildings. Like, okay, so in China, they copied the Eiffel Tower in a housing development 1-to-1. Does anybody value that? Not that many people. I don't think the issue of morality is about authorship. I think it's much more, and I'm starting to get weird here, but I think it's much more about where the power shift is happening when AI tools are implemented, away from expertise and towards the people who are supplying the tool itself, and how much access to data and influence they get. That might be an important question about morality.
Absolutely. Eliana?
I just wanted to make sure to say goodbye because I also have to leave, but it was an amazing conversation and thank you very much. It was a pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much for your participation. It was a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I have a couple of questions here from the audience. I will read it and see if there's anyone that wants to go and run with that one. Is AI making buildings quicker, cheaper, safer, with better quality and more sustainable? Because that is the problem that needs to be solved. The ability to scale, to meet demand. It's not about architects losing jobs. It's about being able to do much more than they do at the moment. So I think the question is mostly about improvements of the building industry.
The answer is yes, right? I mean, it's obviously all of these things have been addressed. You know, I think that we can use digital twins to improve the performance of buildings in terms of environmental performance. The certainly cost is it's actually going to be a battle. Cost is going to be the crucial thing. It's going to people be undercutting people and so on. But it's going to be all those things. It's going to be capable of doing. I mean, it's no question. It's a tool, and you can use it and calibrate it and make it and put it to use in however you want to. And for sure, those are questions that we can address. No problem. But it is going to affect jobs. I'm sorry, it is. We'd be foolish to deny that.
And now you wanna go on?
Yeah. I would maybe think about it in a different way, because the question itself almost implies that building new is the way to go, right? And perhaps it's not. Perhaps the idea is to rescue, work within the structures of what we have, rescue our heritage, all of these sorts of things. And of course, AI has the ability to instrumentalize any desire that we have. But I think the problem is with our desires. And back to the question, what is sustainability? And if we believe sustainability is to build a new building very fast, very cheap, that performs well against solar radiation and stuff like that, and yet uses up a lot of resources mined in other countries, then maybe that's not really what sustainability is. So I think it's about the questions that we send AI to solve. That's the problem.
I would agree with that. I mean, I think that when I published an issue of AD on digital cities, everyone was predicting the future, and Patrick was talking about how the cities would be parametric and things. That never happened, right? And I think what we're going to see in the future is not something out of Jetsons. I think a lot of it's going to be our existing fabric being retrofitted with certain technologies. I think the important thing is going to be particularly the way that the cities operate. You know, I think the traffic, the way that, for example, City Brain in China has been used to reduce traffic problems and so on. It's not about a question of new forms, new sexy forms of buildings. If you want an example, maybe think about a kind of Uber car. You know, an Uber car, then there's no new form of Uber car, because an Uber car is an ordinary car. It's simply the way that it operates, the way the information is being processed. And I think that is going to be the crucial determinant in how our cities operate, not sexy new forms. You know, and I don't think our cities will look very different. When in that issue at AD, all these architects were going on about form. And Ben Bratton just spoke about the iPhone, how the iPhone was allowing us to navigate the city in a complete different way. That's the way to think about it, informational cities and informational processes.
Yeah, there's lots of debate about autonomous self-driving cars and the whole Uber drivers and so on. But let's go back to some of other questions here. There is another question says, if the key to successful AI integration is data, and the greater the database, the more accurate the output, do architects risk teaching AI how to replicate their identity that makes offices unique? Does this then limit the open source interoperability aspect of the industry standardized AI?
Well, I mean, I'll just simply say that these guys are doing it because they want to maintain their office identity. You know, I think Zaha's and Corp Himmelblau, they have over 1,000 projects in Corp Himmelblau they're using to try to articulate something new. It's not the same, but it's using the same kind of language. So it makes sense, I think. I mean, the question is though, that it's not so straightforward. You need to label that data. There's a lot to be done to process that data to make it useful to what you're doing.
I think I'd like to add something to that. I think if we look at our offices, that we have a DNA of our design in our offices, and we want our future designs to be based on the DNA that we have. And I think the only way to do that is to train these AIs on the projects that we've all done. Because of course we can go out and find Coop Himmelblau projects or Zaha Hadid projects and begin to train the AI, but that's not really what people want when they want a Henning Larsen project or a Colby project. There's something about what we've done in the past that inspires people to want something in the future, and I think that we need to train the AI on the past to really develop the future.
Very good point. And Lai?
Yeah, I agree. I think that the question somehow implies that size equals success, which, I mean, I think most men would try to agree with that, but but the truth is that it's about identifying what qualities you want in the training data in the first place, right? So if you are after, if you're saying that, you know, the larger the data set, the bigger the monopoly that you get over the data set, the more accurate your results will be. That's not true. The bigger the data set, the more normalized your results will be. And I think that it's important to make that distinction. And if the industry, say, for example, has been making mistakes over the past 60 years, then you'll get a baking in and a normalization of those mistakes. So the real curatorship is, and this is really interesting because that's where different types of AI have very different characteristics. Like you've got reinforcement learning and different types of machine learning that, and swarm definitions and all sorts of things, and expert systems. All of these operate in different ways, but it's important, I think, to understand what you're feeding in and what you're asking the AI to be attentive to in order to get the results that you want. That's where the power of craft is, I think, in this world.
I think I will throw one more question before we close. I have one here. As students and fresh graduates of architecture, how can we integrate AI in our workflows? Also, what scopes and possibilities lie for research on AI in architecture? So let's start with the first one. What can you do to integrate AI in our workflow from a student standpoint?
Can I just maybe chip in there? I mean, I think there's been a whole discussion about, ChatGPT and people using it to copy in classrooms, right? I already have students that I teach at FIU who use AI the whole time. We do a kind of Black Mirror episode when they do a video. They use AI to generate text. They use AI to turn that text into human voice. Then they use AI to visualize the whole thing. If we simply sort of say deny it and say you can't use these tools, then you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot. There's no point. It's like the argument about calculators. Once you've got calculators, why do you ban them from maths exams? The question is really, well, why do we do long division in the first place? We've got these tools, let's use them and let's include them in some sort of way. All I would say to students is really don't pay attention to your professors, because a lot of them are dinosaurs, and look at what's going on out there. Inform yourself. It's all out there on YouTube. That's the point. And particularly in the digital futures, if you look into AI, we've got all these tutorials that you can find out about those things. But you've got to prepare yourself for the future. And if you were like me, you were at Cambridge where they told you don't use a computer. I mean, I ignored them, right? But they're just going to make you unqualified. You've got to think about the future, and this is what you've got to design, your own future, right? You've got to think about what things are going to be. The most creative students that I've had have actually started moving into the metaverse. They're hosting, conferences for medics and so on in the metaverse. That's what they're doing. Use your ingenuity to think where you can position yourself, because the world is changing. And if you stay where you are going to be left behind. But if you can put yourself in a good position and harness the capability of these tools that are coming online very, very soon, then you're in a very good situation.
I mean, absolutely. Back to the story of the internet is flooded with information. Sometimes it's hard to curate what is relevant, and I think that's also our mission with NORDFY, is that to have access to guys like you that have the knowledge of the practice of what's going on in the studios, and then have this back and forth between what is happening at research level to what is implemented at the studios, because the divide between academia and practice has always been there, and it probably just exacerbates from now on. I think there's one last question that it's perhaps a little bit, should have been thrown to Eliana. She left. It says, do you believe the current developments are going to democratize the discipline, or rather divide it? As I'm unsure about what is the division, but so if no one goes, I will throw out my own thoughts. I think the democratization of the process is enormous, and people that has been creative but has not been able to show their creativity will soon, if not now already, have an array of tools and systems that will help them make those dreams come through in all kinds of. I mean, of course, we are talking about five of the largest offices in Europe, at least, if not in the world. So the scale is a little bit different, but I'm also thinking about like the everyday person that just wants to do some improvement at their apartment or extend their house. There will be a lot of people that had some jobs that might be bypassed by this easy technology. So I think, yes, we are democratizing the discipline. And I think it was you, Neil, that once said, when you Google these days architecture, it really doesn't come so much into building design. It comes to IT architecture. So the whole concept of design is shifting. And La, you have your hand up. I don't know if if you want to say something.
A little experience on, I've got two stories that become one. A little experience on ChatGPT the other day. I was asking who can tell me a specific thing about adaptive transformation. And ChatGPT told me, when I was using someone else's computer, not knowing that it was me, that I had written a report on it in 2014 with two professors from Singapore. The interesting thing is that when you get a response from ChatGPT, it sounds veridical, and we will be more and more encouraged, if you like, by AI to trust the result. But the inability or the lack of ability of human capacity to actually check the result from first principles of AI gives our agency to AI. And it's not just a moral thing, because if you've got 10 companies competing against each other and they're all using AI just to be ahead of the next, who out of those 10 will check everything that not ChatGPT, but whatever AI system is actually giving them? So the power shift is there is a division, but it's not a division between people who are using the system, but there is a division of power between the system generators and the people who are actually using the system. So any bias, any shift in agency is very difficult to detect because we don't have the resources and time to detect what is being fed to us as the answer. Now that's important because companies control AI, and companies deliver this tool, and companies receive the feedback from what we input to the system. And I don't think they've started to try and monetize it yet, but you see what happens with companies like Facebook and Cambridge Analytica and things get instrumentalized in quite disastrous ways. And it will be harder and harder and harder to tell when we're being manipulated and when we're not being manipulated. So I think the division is not really, there will be democratization as to people with access to the tools, because that democratization gives the people who are supplying the tools more monopolistic power. And that can be used to, sell more toothbrushes, or it could be used to change political opinions.
The democratization thing is kind of like, I mean, in the end, I think what's happening is people are using these tools already to do, design their patios and things, which means it's less like work for landscape architect, less work for architects. And you've got to realize that if it allows you to do certain things, I mean, I can do fashion design now, and I'm not trained in fashion design, but then fashion designers can do architecture, and I think this is what's going to happen. I think there's going to be an intense competition and undercutting, and cost is going to be the driver of all sorts of change, and we've got to be alert to that and wise to that and realize that's coming down the road. It's democratization, but also it's opening us up to competition. So that's why I think, to be really creative, we should take over other people's position. We should be developer architects. That would be, to my mind, the most, because you get safeguards written into the AI, which could take you through that quite clearly, And anyway, we've got to think. We've got to be what we should have been in the first place as architects. We should have been imaginative designers, and we've got to design our own future. That's my bottom line here.
Well, we just reached the 2-hour mark, so it's time to call it a day. Anyone wants to add anything else? No? Great. Thank you all for participating. As said, I mean, please, everyone that is still sticking around, follow all these great people on their social media, and we'll see each other on the other side of the summer holidays. Thank you again for joining. It was a blast. Stay well, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks for this fun conversation. Bye-bye.
Yes.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.